Welcome to another episode of County Chatter. With me today from the Regional Emergency Planning Committee, Chip Reilly. Chip, a really great interview, ready to go today. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do for emergency planning and at the county.
Thanks. Well, thanks for having me here today. This is a lot of fun. I'm excited to be here. My name is Chip Reilly. I'm the Emergency Preparedness Director for Barnstable County Department of Health and the Environment. So I work for the county. We're a unique entity in Massachusetts because we have a full functioning county government here in Barnstable County. We're the only one in the state, so we're unique in what we do. And our main function is to support the community. So we work daily. I joke that I work for all 15 towns, as well as the commissioners and the administrator and everyone else in the county. But we're here to support the communities. In our department, we facilitate the Regional Emergency Planning Committee, which we mentioned to begin with, right, which is a group of individuals across the county. So our chair, we have two chairs, Chief Heath Eldridge from Brewster and Chief Peter Burke from Hyannis.
We know Mr. Burke. Chief Burke.
Yep, and they are our chairs, and we work collectively across the county to bring everybody together for big storms, big events. We hold a regional monthly call where we have a topic of the month, whether it be our last meeting, we had our meteorologists come on board and talk about hurricane season, which is upon us, and what the predictions are for the hurricane season. And when we have large impact events that could impact the county, we start with regional calls. So we'll bring everybody, now it's virtual, it used to be either by telephone or in person, but we'll bring everybody to the plate that we can. We have over 500 people on our distribution list across all walks of life on Cape Cod. It's not only government entities, business sector, utilities, private sector, home health care, and anyone that has a need to know what's going on across the county, we invite them to the party so that we can share information and coordinate regionally.
That's fantastic. That's a great introduction to our topic today, which is storm planning. You know, you don't want to wait on your plan. If there's a hurricane or a nor'easter or some other type of weather event, or again, an emergency, a regional emergency, you want to have a plan in place first. So talk about the uniqueness of Cape Cod and storms. It's not just hurricanes. There's lots of other things that are weather related here on the Cape.
Very much so. We're always worried about the big one. We're in hurricane season now. Yeah. Typically, we don't have major impacting hurricanes that affect us until September, October. But we are in a peninsula. We're sticking out into the Atlantic Ocean. And even storms that come by offshore have a potential impact for us. So we're always worried about the big one. We plan for that every day. It's something, you know, we work with the communities every day on how we can be prepared for that. But we also have other weather events. You know, our biggest impacting weather event is usually a winter storm, a blizzard, where we have, you know, especially when we get into sub-zero temperatures, we have power outages that go potentially 2, 3, 4, 5 days. And we could have the biggest impact on our people. But even until a couple years ago, we never talked about large weather events like tornadoes.
Right.
And we saw what happened a couple years ago through the Mid-Cape, where tornadoes, fortunately sandwiched in Falmouth, that the storm went right over them, but then it dropped down into Hyannis and through the Mid-Cape. So, and we saw a couple 2 years ago. So we're conscious of that now, and we're always worried about these weather impacts.
Right, and weather impacts can impact residents in different ways. It may be power outages, which is, I think, what we all think about when we think about weather events. But there's also other things like flooding and coastal erosion. So talk a little bit about how somebody can be personally prepared for all of these hazards that might happen in a weather event.
Sure. So the discipline that I work in is called emergency management. So in emergency management, we take an all-hazard approach. So we do have specific plans for specific things, but in general, we say all hazards. So the plans that we develop are applicable across the spectrum, whether it be a weather event, a technological event, a man-made event. So we can apply that to everything. And we say the same thing about personal preparedness in particular storms. And I always like to start when we talk about emergency preparedness is, what does it actually mean? Because most people don't know, and it can be scary because it can be a wide range topic, and where do I start? So emergency preparedness simply is what we like to refer to it as, is the actions you can take before, during, and after a storm to lessen the impacts on you. It doesn't have to be this big thing, because when you look at it in the bigger scale, it can be scary. So with our residents across the Cape and the islands, and we do include the islands into
Sure.
our little world because they're our close neighbors.
Right.
You know, there are things that they can do: build a kit, make a plan, be informed, and that's an easy place to start.
Okay, let's start.
Okay.
Building a kit. Like, I've heard so many different versions of what you should have, and batteries only last so long in a kit, and I've looked at my can of soup that's in my kit and it was from 2012. So talk about a kit, an emergency kit for, and is there a difference between somebody who may be a senior and somebody who has a family?
Sure. Well, through all of emergency preparedness, the one thing we really like to remind everyone is everyone has different needs. So only you know what you really need in your kit. You know what you need on a daily basis to get by. And the one thing we always start with is medication, especially with our seniors. If you're thinking about leaving your home for, you're building a kit to leave home, you may not want to leave your medications in there, but you should be conscious of the fact that the first thing that goes into that kit should be medication.
Okay.
And so you really need to tailor make it for what you need. But there are some basic checklists available. Ready.gov is a great resource that we send everyone to. It's FEMA's website on emergency preparedness, and they have some great checklists. So you're not going, oh, well, do I need this? Do I not need that? Look at these checklists. The Red Cross has some, AARP has some. They're readily available if you online. Now, our seniors sometimes have trouble getting online,
Right.
but we have sent some hard copies to some of the councils of aging across the Cape.
Okay.
And we can get them for you too. But the idea is to look what's on this list and think of what you would need if you were to leave your house or if you were to stay in your house, and what you need to be comfortable and what you need to survive. Water, food. Now, when I talk about food in emergency situations, I have 2 young children. So I'll come back from the grocery store and they open the fridge and say there's nothing to eat. We want to remind everyone, if you're going into a disaster situation, it's about survival. So you may not like beans, but they'll keep you alive for a while.
Right.
So don't overthink it. You're not gonna put lobster in your bag, as much as we'd like to. But these kits can go far and wide. So, a first aid kit is always important. Again, medication is always huge if you're leaving your house. Food, water, basic necessities. A roll of toilet paper always comes in handy. But these lists are available, and it helps make it easier.
Okay.
I could list off a million things right
Right.
now, and it'll go right over his head.
So it's interesting when we talk about preparedness. It's not necessarily always just the kit. It's where are you going to be when disaster strikes. Now, there are some folks who, if you lose power, perhaps on oxygen or maybe other types of medical situations, cannot stay in their homes. So talk a little bit about sheltering in place versus a regional shelter. So let's start there. Are there regional shelters, and where are they on Cape Cod?
We do. We have a pretty vibrant regional shelter program here on Cape Cod. We have 6 large-scale shelters. They stretch from Falmouth to Eastham, and then we have 2 ancillary shelters, one in Provincetown and another one in Bourndale on the other side of the bridge.
Okay.
So they don't all stand up whenever there's a big impact event. They're volunteer-based, while the communities support them and run them per se, and then we coordinate across the county level. We do have, a shortage of volunteers nowadays, so we don't always open them. Sometimes we pick and choose. The last time we activated, we had 3. We had Falmouth, we had Hyannis, and we had Eastham to give us good regional coverage.
Okay.
But we have these big ones in the event that there were, a major impact event. So we see it mostly on the Cape during winter storm season. Again, we worry about freezing temperatures. and our folks with functional needs who have, like you mentioned, the oxygen saturation machines or other medical equipment that needs power. But we do have this facility, and our shelters are staffed by various partner agencies, including the Medical Reserve Corps, so we have a medical component. We have a pet component.
Okay.
So we've thought through, what's really needed in those shelters.
Right. And what's that decision? You talk a lot about the weather and freezing, but we also have flooding concerns. I look back to a couple of winter storms that we had that the water came right up out of Barnstable Harbor through Millway onto Commerce. I mean, all of that area was inundated. 6A gets inundated on some of our south sides, depending on the type of storm. When do you go to a shelter? Are you asked to go? Do you evacuate? How does all of that work? Can you just show up?
It depends on the nature of the incident, right? So we don't always open shelters. It really has to be a major impact event. And we do that because if we open them every weekend, then we wouldn't have anyone to staff them when we really need them. Right. So, but there are other places that are available, and local communities set up what they call warming centers or cooling centers a lot. A personal care site is the official term, where there's a place to go. In Hyannis here, we have a very big one, right on Iron Ore Road, called the Cape Cod Mall.
Right.
They're great partners and sort of opening their doors so people have a place to go if they need to come and charge their phones or, have a little bit of heat. So it really depends on the nature of the incident, how it is. The big coastal storms, Cape Cod is susceptible. We know that. I'm a Sandwich person, but we have a whole neighborhood in Sandwich that gets cut off because of the marsh when the sea level comes up. But it's short term. It's, maybe 2 or 3 hours.
Right.
So there's certainly other communities on the Cape that face major erosion issues where homes could potentially be lost.
Right.
But it depends on sort of what the nature of the storm is, how big it is. But once that decision is made to shelter or not to shelter, we think it's very important to communicate that. So our communications folks are really great at getting the word out through our social media platforms, through our local news stations, local community access TV, on educating folks on what's open, where they're open, and we're constantly monitoring that and pushing that information.
All right. That actually brings up another point as well. So, we do know that social media and TV and some of the other communication tools that are out there can help you prepare. But let's talk a little bit about when should you be aware. So, we see a lot of what I guess people call storm hype, and they get maybe a little jaded when it doesn't pan out to be as big as maybe the meteorologist said or another entity has said. What's your advice to folks who are monitoring or need or on the need to know when storms are coming and when they need to act?
Well, local media is a great resource to have a basic understanding of what's happening. Sure, there is some hype, but that's sometimes a good thing, to understand what's around, what's coming, what potentially could impact us, and to staying informed. And being informed is a big part of that. The internet, social media is a great platform for that, for certain demographics. Our seniors, we know, aren't necessarily social media fanatics like some of the younger folks are. My children in particular, so we follow a multidisciplinary communication plan where we try to spread the word to as many outlets as we can, to as many people as we can, on what's coming, what's brewing, and the Regional Emergency Planning Committee is a big part of that. We start our regional communication calls well in advance, and our meteorologist is great at keeping us advised when there's potentials. Even my children know when Frank is on the phone, they come running with my phone. He's great. Just the other day, we got a warning, hey, we're watching Western Massachusetts, there's wall clouds forming. It could be an indication of tornado activity. So, him and his folks are keeping an eye on it, and it may be 3 in the morning, Chip, we may be calling you. So we're aware of that, and then we would push that information out to the communities and to all of our partners throughout that. But it's never too early to pay attention, and it really goes back to sort of being prepared for this. It shouldn't be a big lift. And the more you can do to pre-plan, the better off you are. And planning is a big part of emergency preparedness. And talking to friends and families now, and it's a little rainy today, but on the warm, sunny day where there's nothing going on, is starting these conversations with your friends and family like, hey, if there's an incident, where else could you go? If you had to leave your home for a power outage, for an erosion issue, for whatever reason, where else could you go? And we always encourage folks to talk to friends and family, neighbors, people you love and trust, and set that plan up ahead of time. And sometimes it can be a difficult decision. My former next door neighbor, Mrs. Kelly, I love her dearly, she was 95 years old and didn't want to be a burden, right? So I would say, what are you going to do, Mrs. Kelly, for the big storm coming? If you have to leave, she'd be like, oh, I'm just going to go to the shelter. I'm like, but what about your children, your grandchildren? They're all adults. Like, she's like, oh, I don't want to be a bother. They've got their families. But having that discussion early is very important. And what I like to remind people is it's easier to say, hey, you turn the tables. If there's an incident, why don't you come to my house?
Right.
You know, and that makes the conversation easier. You're not asking for something in particular, you're offering, and then it usually helps to start the dialogue. But you want to plan for that ahead of time. Know where else you can go, because you really don't want to come to one of our shelters. Right. There will always be folks that absolutely need to, but they're not comfortable. It's an army cot with a wool blanket and an inflatable pillow. And, you know, food is not good. We do what we can do, but it could be emergency food rations.
Right.
You know, it's a disaster shelter. So we really want to encourage folks to talk to those other folks and see where else you can go.
That's really great advice. And having said that, you've been in this, I want to call it an industry, because it really is. You know, there's so many things that go into emergency planning. Is there a success story that someone can take away from this interview that you think was, you know, people planned correctly and they had, you know, the right kit and they knew where they were going? Is there something like that that somebody can take away today?
My friend, Mrs. Kelly.
Mrs. Kelly.
I love her dearly. She's no longer lives across the street from us, but she's 95 years old. And we would say to her, like, Miss Kelly, what are you going to do? And understand that my children would deliver newspaper every day and her mail in the winter. But she still drove. She still got out. She was still she had an emergency kit. She goes, oh, so the day I was over talking about this one particular storm, she said, oh, I've got my emergency kit right here, my bag, and it's all set and ready to go. And she had a note on the side of her door, right next to her door, that said medication. And it was the smartest thing I've ever seen. So she knew leaving the house that so she wouldn't forget to bring her medication with her. And that's a big one. You know, whether you're going to a friend, family shelter, bring your medication with you.
Right.
Because while we do have some emergency plans for that, Cape Cod Healthcare is a great partner in supporting us in that. If there's an issue, people need to remember to bring their medication. So I love that fact. I love that sign. I took a picture of it. The fire chief at the time came to help her relocate and was like, wow, look at that. That's great. You know. So it was really a wonderful thing to see. But it was just a little bit of planning, a little bit of thinking things through. And again, it shouldn't be the day the storm's kicking in. Spend some time ahead of time. Now, we're all thinking about the beach now. I know that I am here in Cape Cod. But we want to start thinking about winter storm season and, you know, and what can we do to get ahead of it.
Great. Is there anything that I haven't asked that you'd like to impart some wisdom onto our viewers today?
Well, just, you know, emergency preparedness doesn't only include us. If you have pets, it's very important to include your pets in this planning. You know, emergency kits, we talked about emergency kits. It's always good to have a little one in your car. Okay. You know, a little bit of snack, some water, a little snack, and one for your pets. So if you're making an emergency kit to leave during a storm, don't forget your pets. And we know that people won't come. So all of our regional shelters are pet friendly. We accept pets. It's cohabitation, so they're not going to sleep with you in the gymnasium, but we have an area for them. But you know, it's thinking things through ahead of time. You know, yourself, your pets, your family, and don't forget those medications.
Great advice, Chip. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks. This was fun.